All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My pleasure to welcome you all. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mariana Lasso, and I'm a research professor in Drexel University in the Department of Community Health and Prevention and the Urban Health Collaborative. I co-lead I'm co-investigator in salubar climate, and I co-lead the community and policy engagement core of CCUH, a project also focused on climate change and related to today's presentation. And it is my pleasure to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Pedja Stojicic. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. He is executive director of People Power Health, an organization that empowers clinicians, patients, and caregivers with community organizing and social movement skills. As part of this initiative, Dr. Stojicic leads 4 fellowships in health equity, voter registration, immunization, and climate change. He holds a master's of public health from the Harvard Chan School of Public Health and a medical degree from Belgrade University School of Medicine. He's an adjunct lecturer at Harvard, where he teaches 3 courses, enabling teams, enabling large system change and narrative leadership, and therefore shaping the next generation of health and public health leaders. Originally from Serbia, Dr. Stojicic activism began in the 90s when he participated in the nonviolent fight against dictatorship. Afterward, he served as president and executive director of Youth of Yazaz, a pioneering HIV/AIDS NGO, and led Serbia on the Move, the movement building organizations that continues to shape Serbian politics and activism today. His talk is title is Narrative Leadership for Climate Change, Moving People from Awareness to Action. I invite you to read more about him in his bio, which we will put in the chat, and also if you Google him. And before passing the mic to him, I will just have a couple of reminders. I want to remind everybody that we have interpretation to Spanish and Portuguese. You just need to click the word icon in your meeting controls at the panel at the bottom and select the language you would like to hear. Interpretación al español y portugués está disponible. Haga clic en el icono del mundo en el panel que está abajo en Zoom para seleccionar el idioma que desea escuchar. And I think in Portuguese está disponible interpretación al español y portugués. Clique no icono mundo para seleccionar el idioma que vos okay. My Portuguese is not the best. And if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A section of the Zoom. Please, with that, I'll turn the mic to our speaker, and please join me in welcoming him. And thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you, Mariana, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you. My name is Pedja Stojicic, and I'm really excited to be. I do apologize for being a few minutes late. I teach at the School of Public Health here in Boston, and we have a class until 1. So I was trying to rush and to get here so I can be with all of you in this session. It would be lovely. I don't know if that's possible, but it would be amazing if people can also turn on their cameras so we can see each other. This session is about narrative. It's about stories. And it's always, I as much as I love the black rectangles, like I actually don't like them better than the real people. So it's nice to see some faces, and thank you for those who, of course, if you are not in a position to do it, that's fine. But like it would be lovely to see some faces. The topic of the day is narrative leadership, and I think the way we structure that is I do want to just say that there will be moments where we're going to interact, and aside from putting the questions in the chat, we can always address them later. Like I hope we can also have a discussion as we go, and give you an opportunity to reflect on some things that I'm going to share in the presentation. I'm just to quickly introduce myself, and I will tell my story a little bit later. But I am a executive director of People Power Health, an organization that is focused on enabling clinicians to use storytelling and movement building skills to advance not just climate change related causes, but other things that are important for the benefit of our communities and our patients. And then I'm also an adjunct faculty of health policy and management here at the Harvard School of Public Health in Boston, where I'm currently calling in from. In terms of our conversation today, can people see the slides? I hope you can. Thumbs up. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So the reason why we named the session as a narrative leadership, it because if you think about the problems that we are facing, especially around climate, but even more generally about health and health justice, they are not the technical problems. They are not the problems of okay, we need technical solutions, we need a new invention of some sort in order to solve these problems. I would like to make an argument that they are a power problem, and they are a power problem because not in a. I know power is a word that people sometimes are afraid to use in these spaces because it brings a lot of emotions. But like Martin Luther King defined the power as the ability to achieve purpose. And in that sense, like if you think about these problems of climate change, it seems like there's a disconnect between those who actually are in need of change in order to protect our planet, to protect our communities, protect our people, and those who actually have the resources to enact that change. And that disbalance is the major reason why we are not able to enact and do things in a way that would benefit more people. But the thing that the thing that is real also in this context is that if you think about power, power is not static. It's actually really, really dynamic. Like if I have something that you need, who has the power? If I have something that you need, who has the power? You can point out. Who has the power? Yeah, it's me. If I have something that you need, I have the power. If you have something that I need, you have the power. So that idea that power is relational, it doesn't exist if we don't have a relationship with each other. It's not like, oh, hey, these people have power, they will. No. They depend on the cooperation of other people. So because we are interdependent, like power is always relational. It only comes out of the fact that we are in a relationship with each other. And because it's relational, that means that in a particular way, leadership can be exercised and created in order to mobilize power. And I think the part of the reason why you're here and why we are going to talk about narratives is because stories are a really powerful way to mobilize and enable people. But before we go there, I wanted to kind of name how am I thinking, and this is the definition by my colleague and friend, Professor Marshall Gans, how we are thinking about leadership. Leadership is something, as by this definition, is that responsibility for enabling others to achieve shared purpose in the times of uncertainty. And the reason why this definition is important, and you will see why that is relevant to storytelling, because if your focus, first of all, to recognize that leadership is not needed when things are certain. So if you're looking at this moment right now, and you're asking yourself how we are ended up here, what is happening in the world, like how are we going to solve all these problems? Well, that's a good space for leadership. That's exactly the only space where leadership is required. Because when things are certain, when they are exact, when you know what, then I don't know about you, but I've never seen an organization being completely functional and somebody coming in and saying like, oh, who is in charge here so we can thank them, like that they're doing a great job. That doesn't happen. It usually it's the opposite. When things are really, really uncertain and hard and complex and messy, that you know people are asking who is in charge, who needs to take the lead here. But the other important part of this definition is the enabling others part. Because if the leadership is about enabling yourself, then I would argue it's a wrong kind of leadership because that is not serving anyone except for you. If the leadership goal and your intent here is to enable other people, then it becomes a completely different exercise. And storytelling and narratives and stories can be really, really, really important thing in that sense. So I've told you my titles, but I wanted to also share the story of when did I have a first chance to exercise this? So I was born in Yugoslavia, a country that doesn't exist anymore, in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, and grew up most of my life in that country. And when I was in medical school, I remember I was a third year of medical school. It was during the civil war in Yugoslavia that started. And I wanted to be a vascular surgeon. That was my kind of dream. I wanted to be a surgeon and vascular surgeon in particular. And because of the war and all the constraints of that, even as students, we were able to start practicing, to get into the operating rooms and work with amazing surgeons because they lacked staff. There was not enough people, and they will actually really be resourceful and bring anyone who is willing to help and work. And a professor, like his name was Lazar Davidovich, he was like a famous professor. He asked me, like, we were practicing, and he said, like, you are going to be a great surgeon if you stop wasting your time on that public health bullshit. And what he was referring to was the fact that at the time, aside from being in medical school, I was also working with young people to fight HIV/AIDS in Eastern Europe, not just in Serbia and Yugoslavia, but in the whole Eastern Europe, because there was a huge epidemic of HIV/AIDS at the time. And we had a beautiful youth movement of doing peer education with zero budget, no resources, but being extremely resourceful. And for me, that was a real contradiction. Like, what is this idol of mine saying that basically what I'm doing is not practicing medicine? And I thought always that that is practicing medicine because I grew up in a large family. My father had 6 siblings, and my whole life we were always in a big community. Like in my grandmother's backyard, there was always like 40, 50 people. Like when we were playing around when I was a kid, like all the extended family, and we would do stuff together and play and do all these things in a community. And that was a source of joy and love. And we were not rich, but we were rich in love, as my grandmother used to say. And when I was at the age of 7, I remember coming into a house and walking across the room and seeing across the room my dad sitting on a beige couch. I will never forget that, completely white and covered in sweat. And he was whispering, "I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe." And for me, like as a little child, like I got frozen. I've never seen my dad being powerless, and I ran out of the house. I called my uncle Raka. He was a big guy. He was a police officer, and I don't remember a lot of things, but I remember him shouting, "We need a doctor. We need a nurse," because my father was having a heart attack. And what was really interesting, out of all these people in my grandmother's backyard, there was not a single doctor, not a single nurse. I've learned later it was because even in the communist Yugoslavia, to become a doctor or a nurse, you needed to be part of a certain group, that was more privileged. And my family was not part of that group. So for me, to become a doctor or to become a nurse or a clinician was the idea of saving your family, saving my dad. It was as simple as that. But at the same time, when the war started, like there were other things happening around us, and we started protesting against Milosevic and really kind of like doing a lot of work in that space. And what was really interesting in the time is that this contradiction that was playing out in medicine was something that bothered me really much, where the work that was happening in community was discarded as not part of the healing. And at the same time, we were living in a dictatorship And it was obvious that you cannot be healthy if you're living in a dictatorship. There's no way you can kind of like, exercise your right for health if your freedom is constrained. So for me, that contradiction that healing is only about one patient at a time got me into public health and got me where I am right now, is that I always believed it's much more. And I think there is a responsibility for public health professionals and clinicians to actually exercise that, to think about healing as not just healing one person at a time, but healing as a society, healing as a group. And that's my motivation to do this work. But regarding climate, I think it's really important. Like there's one thing that we at the time that I was always, always, always angry at my parents, my mom. My father died, unfortunately, like after a second heart attack a couple of years later. But my mom and my other older kind of like family members, we were always angry at them because they didn't raise their voice uh, when was the time to stop that war that was happening in Yugoslavia. We always were thinking like if they were just louder, if they organized, if they did something, we wouldn't have to go through those atrocities that happened in the Civil War. And in a similar way, I feel about climate the same way today. I have a 10-year-old son right now. Uh, and, when I think about the future of this planet, not the one particular country, but of this planet, I really don't want to see myself being asked by my son 10 or 15 years down the road, what did you do? Where were you? Why did you raise your voice? Why did you talk about these things when we still had time to do something? So that is my motivation to be here and to be with you and do a lot of other things related to climate and work with people who are interested in that. But back to the topic of the day, which is the stories. So the stories are really, really powerful. Like we talked about leadership, we talked about power. The stories are powerful because you all know Harari defined this in a really beautiful way, that they allow us to actually cooperate in large numbers. If you think about our ability to do work, collective work together, it's driven by the stories that we tell to each other, because human beings, believe it or not, maybe that's not news for you, but like I think it is, we are a storytelling machines. So to demonstrate that in real life, I'm going to show you a quick video. There's no sound to this video, so don't expect the sound to be there. But I want to show you the video because let's look at this together, and then we're going to discuss what do you see, what have you seen. So hopefully you can see this. Can people see it? Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And I can even put the speed here at 25 faster. Okay, so what did we see? What did you see here? I'm going to stop. Tell us more.
It seemed like the red triangle, I think it was a little bit having some conflict with some of the other ones, and at some point the wrong one managed to get in, but the other ones got out, and then yeah, there was not too much cooperation going on there, it seemed.
What did other people see? Astrid, I see you're almost there to unmute yourself, so I'm just going to call you in.
Bueno, lo que yo vi es que el círculo se aislaba tanto de los triángulos y como que no seguía, no permitía que entrara, sino que totalmente era a cerrarse. Era eso. Eso fue lo que yo observé.
Yeah, interesting. What else are people seeing? Thank you for that. That's really interesting. Yeah, feel free to just unmute and speak up. ¿Qué pasa aquí?
Well, the red one was very angry at the end and broke the house. They were trying to get the other two, and the other two were very happy when they were able to escape. But the red one was furious.
The red one was furious. Daniela, what have you seen?
Thank you. I also want to say that the red one is furious, but on the other side, like it doesn't have any emotion. Like we are putting the emotion in the story because they're just figures. So we're assuming it was upset because it destroyed everything, but like the emotion is the one we're giving it to it, not because we're not seeing expression. I don't know if my comment makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and it's a great segue to this. So what you have seen is the Heider-Simmel experiment that was done in the 50s or 60s. And what they basically showed to people is this little kind of like, thing going on. If you look at the objective reality, what was happening there is just like random shapes, geometrical shapes moving around on the screen. That's, if you want to be completely objective, that's what it is. However, when they done that experiment, almost 100% of people who were part of it actually told the story. Like even right now, we did the same thing because our brains are responding to uncertainty, to novelty with storytelling. That's how we respond. That's our natural instinct to explain the world around us through stories. And sometimes, and the reason why that is so important, why that experiment was so critical, is not just to understand that humans are storytelling machines, like we are, we know that, but it's also to understand why we are doing that. What is the reason behind that? And the reason behind that is to help us get the meaning out of the uncertainty in the world around us, to figure out what does it mean, what is happening around us, and how we can actually understand these things that are around us in the context of the meaning. And I really want to emphasize that because that is part of the storytelling thing that we want to talk about here, that especially useful in activism, is that if you confuse the information in the story as the truth in a story, then you end up in a lot of problems like we are right now in public health, for example, because the information is not what the truth is in the story. It's the meaning that story gives us, because otherwise we wouldn't spend like centuries reading the story about David and Goliath, for example. Is it because we are interested in how to deal with giants? Do they exist? I don't know. Or you go to the movies and you spend a lot of money, at least I am. I'm a big fan of Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. Like why we are listening to these stories, because we want to understand, how to deal with Mordor. Like the data is not the point. The meaning is the point. And that is the truth. And the problem in healthcare and public health is that we are sometimes thinking that if we give more information to people, then they will understand us. Where the right question for us to ask is like, how can we give them the meaning? And that is usually done through stories because it has an emotional component to it. Because if you think about how people make decisions, they do it by integrating two things. One is the logic and data and evidence and all of that. It's important. I don't want to dismiss that. It's actually one part of our decision-making process. The other part is emotional part, why certain things matter. The language of that emotional part is critical, and that language is the storytelling language. It's the stories. Because once you integrate the two, you can make a decision. And I can give you evidence of this if you're interested in evidence and science around this. because it turns out that the stories are way better in activating the parts of the brain that are kind of like much more engaged when they hear stories than when we hear data. It's only a few parts of the brain that are activated by that. But when you hear a story, you actually hear not just information, but you also hear other things, and you hear the emotional significance of that. And when people tell you, oh, we're going to make a rational decision, you should laugh at that, because there's no such thing as a rational decision. Decisions are shaped by our emotions, because through those emotions, we are communicating our values. We are communicating what it takes and what we care. But let's dive into a little bit about the practice of storytelling, because I did promise you, how are you going to use this in the context of leadership? The practice of storytelling depends on one thing and one thing only, and that is this idea of a moment. So if I tell you that I woke up this morning, I had I brushed my teeth, I did a little bit of kind of like figuring out what I'm going to wear, came to School of Public Health, taught one class, then did a wonderful Zoom for amazing group of people, and then I went back home and to bed. Is that a story? It is, but it's kind of a boring story. Kathy, you were saying like distinctively no. What is going on? Like why is it not a story? What is it missing?
Missing the meaning. It feels like that's just a list of facts of things you did.
Just a
They're
chronological
not connected, and
yeah, there are no moments. But if I tell you, like, I woke up this morning and I got out and my car was broken, I couldn't turn it on, then it becomes a moment. And that moment is important, because it's that moment that, not that you're interested in how to fix the cars, but you're interested what it takes to deal with that moment of uncertainty. Because that moment will, believe it or not, reveal the emotions, my emotions. Oh, I was so mad, the car was broken. Who did this? Like, how is it not working? Like, what can I do about it? Like, can I get to school like in a fast enough? Can I take the train? Like, what is, like, it's just gonna bring a lot of emotions. And those emotions will surface my values and my motivations. Like, what do I care about? Do I care about this or that? Like, and through that, then I can actually take action, because the moment that I face, the moment of car is broken, is that moment where I start realizing, oh, I have to do something about it. It surfaces my values. What do I care about? How do I want to deal with that situation? And that propels me into movement. And it's the exact same thing that is happening in stories. Whenever you share a story, you're actually sharing moments. That's why when we ask people to share a story, we ask them to share about the moments that matter, like specific details of those moments. Because if you bring us into those moments, then we can understand what is the emotional significance of that. We can understand the values that are behind that, and that's going to propel us into action. So if you think about reenacting that whenever you share a story, that's the main goal here. That's really what makes it so powerful. And there are certain emotions, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. We can spend the whole day talking about this, but there's certain emotions that are enabling us to have mindful action, and there are certain emotions that are enabling us to have not so mindful action. So if you think about inertia, apathy, fear, isolation, what do you think? Is that enabling us to have mindful action, or it's doing something else? What do you think? Carolina?
I mean, it obviously points to keep us not too mindful about the actions we're going to take.
Yeah, it might move us into action. Like fear can move you into action, but it's not going to be a mindful action. It's not going to be the action that might respect other people. It might actually be reacting, and sometimes really bad. But there are other emotions that, like urgency, like anger. And anger is a tricky one, because it's actually outrage when you see the injustice. That's when we react in a really positive way. Hope, solidarity, and yukmed. Yukmed is you can make a difference. It's also like known as self-efficacy. So in your stories, when you do the stories, you wanna actually elicit those emotions. And then there is a particular framework called public narrative that I want to quickly introduce to you, and we're going to skip because I want to show you a model. I want to show you the example of this. The public narrative is the framework that Marshall Gans, who is a professor here at Kennedy School and a long-term organizer, he created that framework to help us tell the stories in the context of activism. And basically, he's saying, like, when you share a story to move people, you need to think about three things. Like, one is, how do I share a story of self? How do I share who am I? Why do I care? What do I bring to leadership? Like, similar to what I did with all of you, I shared not just my bio and academic titles, but I shared my experiences, and that allows you to connect in a different way with that person. That allows you to say, like, okay, maybe I could choose to work with Pedja, but not just because of his titles, but because I have a better sense of who he is, what he stands for, what he is interested in doing in the world. So that's the story of self. The story of us that goes a step further to say, what are we as a group? What are we as a collective? And then the story of now is how we're going to deal with the current moment, what we're going to do in this current moment in time. So I want to show you an example how this could look like, and we can then have a short conversation and then open it to questions. And this is interesting. This example was recorded in a workshop that we did with people similar to you, like people who are interested in climate and interested in research and health and all of these different aspects. So let me stop for a second. Just to stop sharing so I can reshare. Just give me 1 second to figure this out, because this is going to be, okay, where is that video? 1 second. Okay, great, there it is. So Cindy Hu is the name of the activist. And as you're listening to this, try to listen to these three elements, like the story of self. How does she communicate who she is? How does she communicate who we are? Maybe you are not part of that group that she will talk to, but maybe you will feel it as well. And then what is the current challenge that she is inviting us to do something about? Like, why we should actually pay attention and do and take action on certain things. So let's watch it together, and then we're going to discuss it a little bit.
It is 10:07 a.m. in a rural second grade classroom. Most of the students are hunched over their math worksheets, pencils scratching. But one boy isn't moving. His head is down on his desk, hand pressed to his jowl. His molar has been aching for days. Their town's water isn't fluoridated. The nearest dentist is over an hour away. His mom works 2 jobs and hasn't been able to take time off. So this boy, just 7 years old, is trying to make it through the school day in pain, unable to concentrate, falling behind. This is what health disparity looks like, not in theory, but in silence, in missed learning, in preventable pain. And we may see more of it. Recently, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. called on states to ban fluoride in drinking water. It's a direct challenge to decades of public health consensus, a move that threatens one of the most cost-effective and equitable protections we have. If we don't speak up clearly and urgently, we risk losing the systems that quietly keep people safe, especially those without other options. I know not to take safe drinking water for granted. As a child in China, our tap water wasn't safe to drink. One afternoon, after a small earthquake, my school evacuated to the playground. I was thirsty, so I tried to fill my bottle with boiling water because that's how tap water was consumed. I spilled it, burned myself badly, and ended up in urgent care. I just wanted water, not to risk injury. Years later, I visited Boston for the first time. I was amazed to see people drink straight from the tap. It felt like magic. I told my mentor I wanted to make that possible for everyone. He suggested I become an engineer. But I chose public health, not because it was easier, but because it spoke to something deeper, a belief that health is a human right, and that serving others, especially those without power, is a responsibility I carry. That belief runs deep in my family. My great-grandmother fought in the Chinese Civil War. In her final years, she lost her eyesight from complications of diabetes. I was 5 when I became her eyes, guiding her around the house. That's when I learned what it means to lead, not through big gestures, but small, steady acts of care. And I know I'm not alone in that belief. I look around this room and see people who have also made that choice. My teammate Anna Reed once shared how, as a kid, she used to go camping, surrounded by the beauty of nature, but she was not just enjoying herself. She was also thinking about the kids who couldn't have the same opportunity to enjoy what she had, either because financial constraints, poor health, or pollution. That thought of others is equity. Many of us here do the invisible, technical, and sometimes thankless work of public health because we believe it matters. We spend our days buried in messy data sets, drawing DAGs, refining assumptions, because if we can cut through the noise and convince just one policymaker, one agency, one community, then someone's life may be better because of what we did. Even if we never meet them, even if we never know their name. That's the power of this community, scientists and public health leaders who don't shy away from complexity, but use it to push for progress. And now we need to harness that power. The American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, along with 250 other health organizations, is circulating a letter in support of community water fluoridation. It's a response to recent political efforts to undo decades of public health progress. If you believe no child should suffer in silence because their town's drinking water didn't have fluoride, you can add your name. The link is circulating this week. It takes you 2 minutes. This is a small act, but with so many of us here, it's also a loud one. Because the future we want, where tap water is safe, where health is protected, where science is trusted, won't speak for itself. We have to speak for it. So please join me.
That's it. So yeah, let's give her a round of applause. She's not here. What do you take away from this? Like, just briefly before we dive into open questions, like I see some claps and people are, so did this move you? Like, and what moved you if it did? Like, just by listening to this story. You could see the 3 elements. What did you learn about her? Let's start with that one. Who is she?
Well, we learned some stuff about her family, so we learned some stuff about her background. And that sort of linked to why she was interested in the campaign that she was doing.
Yeah, exactly. And it was not about bios. Bios you can read, but it was about something more important, and it's where those values are coming from. Like why she is choosing to do the work that she is choosing. What else did you learn? I'm curious about her. Anything else? Did you learn anything else? Go ahead.
Pedja, if you may.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm touched. I'm very touched by this story, especially the when she said that some of these things are preventable, you know. That touches me, and it shows how public health or how health as a human right, access to health as a human right. It's something, when you talk health equity, that's what public health advocates, or that's what we as public health expect advocates for, which is health equity, equity and access. So I am touched by her story, and I'm. It's one of those elements that gets you as a person, and it serves as also as a motivation. For
Yeah.
me, it's a motivation to hear that there are people that are doing this. I am not alone, because I am doing this as a routine in a hospital.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you
So
for
thank you for sharing this story. No,
yeah.
thank you very much for sharing this story.
Yeah.
It helps a lot.
It's really interesting what you're saying, like a couple of things I want to name out here. She didn't talk about any data. She didn't give us a lot of
No.
information about like the statistics and stuff. Like we are public health professionals, and most of us live in that space. She gave us something else. She gave us the feeling of being seen, what you're describing. Oh, I'm
Mhm.
home. I have, and then also through those stories, like emotional elements. You're saying like I was touched by this story. You didn't say like I was informed by this story. You said I was touched,
No,
which was really, really
it
different
hits.
way of interacting with people. And look, I don't get me wrong. I will wrap us up here and then open up for questions. You know, it's not about dismissing what we do. Like it's really important to keep doing the spreadsheets and element evidence and really doing our job well, because there's a responsibility that we hold to actually provide the data that communities are needing. And at the same time, what I want to make an argument for is that to create space that we can also bring our human elements, our stories, our experiences into the work that we do, because that will allow us to make the connection with people that is different than what we are experiencing right now. Because I would say and argue that one of the reason why, at least in the United States, why a lot of things are shut down right now in public health is because we lost that connection with people. We decided not to share
Yes.
ourselves, and then people cannot see us anymore. They cannot see who we are. They see the numbers that we provide, they see the amazing accomplishments that we provide, but they don't see us. And because they don't see us, they cannot trust us. And that is one of the reasons why I think these skills, alongside with skills of hard science that we all bring, are equally critical for the moment that we're living right now. I will stop there and invite Mariana. I don't know how you were planning to facilitate, but I just wanted us to have time for questions and
Of
discussion.
course. Thank you very, very much. Please, this was amazing and very thought-provoking. So let's open it up for questions or comments for Pedja. Katie, please unmute yourself. And
Sure. Thanks, Mariana, and thank you so much for the talk, and for the invitation to actually sit and listen. It's really easy to have these going in the background, and I put on the video and sat here and listened. So thanks for that. I think just jumping off that very recent example, I have other thoughts on the rest of the talk, but from that video in particular, I couldn't help but have the thought almost right away of, okay, but when is she going to come out and be defending all the attacks, or all the questioning of this and all the, maybe with or without data, but it felt like I was expecting that piece to emerge there, the sort of preemptive defense of the reason that we're seeing the erosion of these policies to have the fluoridation and otherwise. So I don't know if you could speak of it to your perspective and experience with sort of anticipating those questions, and how does that fit into a storytelling? Because it seems like we need to do some of that, but obviously just throwing facts back at people doesn't work. So how do you incorporate that piece of kind of addressing people's concerns and questions within within a narrative or within the storytelling?
Yeah. Well, there's a limit to storytelling as well. Like, but I wanna emphasize one important thing here. Like, I think part of the work of storytelling is to create that tension that you're describing, Katie. Is it Katie or Katie, or like how do you go?
I hear it all ways, but usually Katie is fine.
Katie. Okay, so Katie, so what you're describing is like, if you think about it, what you're describing right now is you have that, after hearing the story, you have an emotion. It created an emotion for you to move you into say, like, we need to actually do something about this. We need to, and I think that's the opportunity that stories can create. They cannot solve the problem, but they might create an opportunity for people to get engaged together. Because again, another feature of us as human beings compared to artificial intelligences and others is that we sense make together. People process things together collectively. We don't, rarely we just like sit down and do it by ourselves. Like, it's actually a collective process in many cases that we're figuring things out. So stories can be an invitation not to provide all the information and all the solutions, but if they create enough energy for us to say, like, well, let's get together to figure this out. Let's get together to figure out what's at stake. Let's get together to understand all the dynamics that are happening and all the information that we need to share with each other. That is the power of the story. But it cannot solve all the information problems, because the information problems are collective problems and mostly the coordination problems. But for us to get together is the first step towards solving them. So if you felt that urge to say, like, okay, after this I want to actually get together with some people and figure things out, that is what story does. After that, we, as I think we have the capacity to actually provide some good science here as well. But that is once we get together. So it's two different sides of that coin. But you're absolutely right, and it will be a disservice to imagine that stories can solve all the problems. But if they create the space where we can actually be together somehow and think together and be collective, that is what the ultimate opportunity here is. Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
I don't see any other hand up yet or question in the chat, but I do have a question. So, well, other thing, and it is about at the very beginning, Pedja, you talk about having a shared purpose, or just the importance of a shared purpose. Here, the story resonates with a lot of us. All of us are public health practitioners in one way or another, but in reality, what I think what we've seen over the past few months is that, we live in a world in which people don't have necessarily our shared values and perspectives. So how do you advise in this storytelling? How do we incorporate the fact that perhaps, the people I'm wanting really or needing to reach don't necessarily.
Yeah. You look, I deeply understand the moment right now, and you're absolutely right. Like and at the same time, well, there are two thoughts about that. Like, one is that I recently, maybe 6 months ago, did a talk here, like at the school, about storytelling, and it was also about my argument that in the years ahead of us, the real fight that we are going to have is the fight for connection, fight for connecting with others. And that means connecting not just with people we agree with, but connecting with people that we disagree with. Because ultimately, we need to recognize that we live in an interdependent world and that there's no escape. Like, there's no, like, one interesting thing that I've learned through my activism in Serbia. Serbia was in a dictatorship, and we had a dictator in the 90s, but we also had the UN sanctions. and that meant that we couldn't escape. We couldn't leave the country. It was impossible. So on one side, you're living in a country that you disagree with the leadership, you are against the war, but the other side, the international community is saying like you need to stick in there. There's no way out. So the only way for us to deal with that problem was to actually go and figure out how to talk to people we did deeply disagree with. I will never forget my first time when I was asked as part of the nonviolent activism to actually reach out to police officers and give them flowers. Those are the same police officers who were actually beating us up on the streets. And it was so antithetical. It was like, why we're doing this? This is not, yet it was the only way out because we didn't have any other escape than to recognize that they are also in the same, excuse my language, shit as we are. And they're also living the same problem just on the other side of things, despite the fact that, so that is the work. And it's hard work. It's not an easy work. But I do believe that stories can help that because once you go to the human experience, it turns out that we have much more in common than we don't. If you move away the big words of equity, of all of that, and you go to the experience, what it means. There's this wonderful book called Blind Spots that sometimes we mixed up the thermometer with heat. Thermometer is there to measure something, but the real things that exist is, do we feel hot or not? That's our experience. And we get obsessed fighting over thermometer. Oh, what kind of thermometer is that? Like what? And we forget the lived experience. And then you have that problem. But if you go to the lived experience, I think that's where the opportunity is. I'm being hopeful, but not optimistic. I think optimism is arrogant because it assumes that everything will be okay. It's not granted, but if you're hopeful, you believe in a possibility that kind of connection can be made once we get to the bottom of the things, which is the human experience. And like as much as it feels, the other advice is avoid Twitter, avoid social media in general, because all of that world is not a real world. It's a make-believe world that people live in. They can be angry, they can be all of that stuff. And if you get sunk into that, you tend to kind of forget, like, oh, these are my neighbors. Let me talk to them. Let me knock on their door instead of looking what they're posting on social media. Because once I knock on their door, I might hear a different story than what they're posting there when under the veil of anonymity. So it's just anyway. I hope that helps, Mariana.
Thank you. Perhaps we have time for one more comment or question.
Yes, I had a question, but it's relating to the presentation that you made,
Sure.
where you showed those slides on anger. There were arrows there, and I wanted to ask you, where does pain fall under? Because I tend to use a lot of pain to fuel my advocacy around public health. The same as what happened on the video. She was feeling the pain of children that were suffering from oral conditions, and then she felt, but this is avoidable. Now I wanted to I'm not sure if it's something good, but for me it's working.
Yeah,
because I can see the advocacy around that. So where does pain under? Is pain a good motivation in public health?
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah, I think it's not pain per se, because we are trying to avoid the pain, And the thing what pain does, if it's like communicated through story as an emotion, it does actually activate the injustice piece, I would say. It is actually like that outrage, like, because we don't, we all have experiences of pain and we all have experiences of hope. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Like, if you just had the pain in your life, then you would be knowing that something can be changed and can be done. But if you only had hope and you never had pain, then you would not know what needs to be changed. So it's a really powerful emotion, but only if it's coupled with hope. with possibility, because I think that connection between the pain and hope is where the fine line of kind of like energy is to move people forward. Because yeah, as I said, like, and I think pain as an emotion does activate a lot of those sense of injustice, the sense of solidarity. If you think about when we see, just naturally as human beings, when we see, unless you're a psychopath, when you see other people in pain, you want to help them because it's our natural instinct, because that's what we do, because we expect others to do the same for us, because we know what the pain is. So I really think it's a powerful emotion. But I want to caution, but just leaning into pain, because if you just lean into pain, it can lead into despair, and people might end up feeling, oh, like it's all pain, it's all suffering, therefore there's nothing we can do. But couple that with hope, with possibility, with solidarity, with love, then you get into a completely different space. And yeah, I hope that is helpful. So I know we are at time. So
Well, thank you. Yes, we're at time. Thank you all very, very much for joining today. And thank you especially our speaker, Pedja, for joining us and giving us this very inspiring presentation and encouraging us to go with this path of storytelling to complement our work. And just a reminder that our next webinar of this series is Thursday, January 15, next year, 2026, and it's Paula Diaz-Levy of Climate Tracker in Latin America. Science and environmental journalist. So I hope you can all join me, and thank you again for joining us, Pedja, everyone.
Thank you much for this opportunity. I really enjoyed it. Me encanta mucho esto.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.
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 Hasta la próxima.
Hasta la
Thank
próxima.
you very much, everyone.
Thank you.